concise solution of the problems we are facing. Ian Duncan Smith has said that he's one of the reasons for welfare reform is to make work pay. And how does that therefore relate to we have a significant money advice service, and most of the referrals are coming from people who already are in work. Would you comment on the ability of the living wage to help? What is your view on the capacity, if the living wage was introduced, as it has been into local authorities, whether that could be more widely applied and would help people to be able to afford to work?
Good question, and it reminded me of a point, a pretty fundamental point actually I should have made more explicitly in my opening remarks. It goes back to the point I made about the language around the welfare debate, all about being about scroungers and folk who lie in bed all day. Actually, most of the impact of welfare reform is on people who are already working. It's on the working poor, people on low incomes. They're the ones that are being hardest hit by these changes. I'm a bit supportive of the living wage. The Scottish Government pays all our staff the living wage. We now pay the living wage in the health service, as you say, local authorities pay the living wage. We can't force private sector employers to pay the living wage, but we send a very strong encouragement to them that they should do so. I know times are tight. I know for many businesses times are very tight, and judgments and decisions and balances have to be struck. I'm very conscious of that, but if we can make sure that work, when people are in work, is paying them a wage that they can live on, then we reduce reliance on the welfare system that way. And to me, that is a much more sensible and humane way of cutting the welfare bill than just taking money out of the pockets of people who are really, really struggling. So that's my position on that. We're looking at a variety of ways in which we can encourage the private sector to follow the lead of the public sector, notwithstanding the difficulties they're facing, but it's a better approach to cutting the bill than the one we're seeing just now.
Thanks so much. Excellent contribution. Thank you. Other questions or contributions or proposals? Yes, sir.
As the rest of the living wage can make companies more likely to take people on and actually exacerbate the unemployment problem?
Well, that's why I was very careful to say I understand the financial climate companies are operating in just now, and there is a balance to strike. We want companies to be employing, we want them to be recruiting, we want them to take people on. So I recognise that balance. We've had to think carefully about these issues in terms of the health service, for example, at a time when money is tight. But we also have to ensure that people have a decent standard of living. So I think it's about encouraging. Even if a company can't do it immediately, are they planning to do it? Can they plan to do it? And I think that kind of encouragement is important.
Thanks, Nicola. Other contributions or questions? Yes?
Nicola, I'm Richard James. I'm head of economic development for, believe it or not, a large audit practice. Curiously. We did work on the impact of welfare reform for several councils in Scotland about a year and a half ago. One of the things that we pointed out at that time was that it's all very well providing money advice, and you should. But when the problem is as fundamental as there's other things you should consider. One of those was around helping people in low incomes make their money go as far as possible. And some of the things we suggested we should look at were alternatives to high street money, alternative forms of finance. We thought we should look at, and I think this is one for the government, looking at ways in which the higher cost items in the domestic budget can be procured as cheap as possible. And one of the largest costs is energy. And people on low incomes tend to pay a higher proportion of their income, and they pay a higher price for energy because of how they have to procure it. And I think a number of these things, there is space for a national initiative to try and address the balance. There's a good example of a community bank in Wales that some of these councils looked at cloning or replicating these places. Something around alternatives to high-cost forms of purchasing energy, something around energy efficiency. Any of these things but they will probably work better at a national level than they would at a local authority level. And I would suggest one of the things you ought to do is, if you're not doing so already, put a bit of a push behind some of those. You can't give people more money because there isn't any. The best thing to do is make sure they have those as far as it can possibly go.
No, I think that's all. I think it's been valid and sensible advice, and certainly take those suggestions away. I mean, we as a government, we are very supportive of the credit union movement and support financially through third sector resources, credit unions, and I think they are one alternative source to some of the high street sources of finance. In terms of heating, I mean, again, we support district heating schemes. I know there's a particular procurement approach to getting people to come together to procure energy in Dundee, which I think has got potential applicability to other parts of the country. I mean, we've kind of, in a sense, demonstrated as a government how well that works. One of the first things, and not a headline grabbing thing we did when we came into government, was get all of the public sector, all of the NHS and local government to look at procuring their energy through a single source as well, and save masses of money that way. So it's a good illustration of the fact that can be done. So I'll certainly give some further thought about how we can put further impetus behind that on a more national scale.
Thanks so much. One last question, Joe. Nicola, two last questions. Joe, we thought about maybe how we can accelerate adding value to the energy. Scotland does have a rich resource. The danger is we could export it south of the border and they use it to turn it into product and service and sell it back to us. So when we've got our hand on the raw materials, a bit like out in the Gulf as well, and we're adding value to the oil, how can we accelerate that so that we can have more manufacturing, more industry with the energy that we have?
Absolutely, I think it's a very good point. If you look at development of renewable energy technologies in Scotland, we're putting as much emphasis on the community benefits, the need to derive employment from investment in renewable as we are on the generation of the energy itself. So, I agree with that. If you get any particular ideas you want us to look at, and I'd be very interested in taking them forward. Yeah, by all means, pass them on. But I think the general point, and we've got a big opportunity again through renewables and community renewables, as opposed to the massive big schemes to try to derive that kind of added value from it.
And one example is I used to work for Scottish Enterprise and SDI, and I don't think it's in the literature that we promote that in Scotland as being the place to come create your facility. We talk about the energy generation, the technology, but actually the rest of the UK is going to face down very quickly. And we didn't have that in Scotland, so it's a big attractor to come here. It's thinking about that. Liz?
I'd like to have a celebration of the consequences of the water sector. I just wanted to ask, like you, I'm really, really aware of the impact that's taking place in Glasgow right now. We have a membership base with 600 water organisations in the city. We're hearing some horror stories, just exactly as you've described. Some worse actually around rates regarding suicide, for example, and some of the steps that have been taken around this. I just wondered to what extent obviously the welfare fund is really welcome, and then the additional input in terms of the advice services. I'm wondering to what extent you are looking at other options. Of course, I'm coming from a third sector division here, but your social enterprise input, other organisations that really kind of pick up the pieces at community level. And to what extent, because Glasgow is way beyond any other area being hit disproportionately by the impact of weather football, is there, are you looking at the case, a special case in terms of spatial support for the city?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if you take the fund for advice services that we've set up, which will be administered through the Scottish Legal Aid Board, the criteria in terms of allocation is very mindful of where the greatest need is. And as a Glasgow MSP, I'm acutely aware of the intensity of the need in Glasgow because of the demographics and the deprivation statistics there. The short answer to your question is we are open to doing anything that we reasonably can to mitigate the impact of what's happening and to help those who are in the front line of helping people with it. I've been conscious from day one of this, though, that I have to be honest with people about the extent to which we can take away all of the impact, because we're not taking these decisions, they've been taken for us. We have a fixed budget in the Scottish Government. And this is not a moan about money being tight, it's just a statement of fact. We've got a fixed budget. It's a budget that is under its own pressures and is declining. If I add up the extra 10 million, or just over 9 million to be accurate about it, that depends on the Scottish Welfare Fund, what must be about 7 or 8 million now that we're given to advice services, the 40 million that between us and local authorities we've had to find to plug the 10% cut in council tax benefit, that's a lot of money that we, by right, should have been spending on other things, hopefully spending on preventative measures rather than just trying to plug the gaps that are opening up because of welfare reform. There is a limit to how much of that you can do within a fixed budget, because you're now getting to the stage where if I want to find more money to help somebody affected by welfare reform, it's going to end up coming from a budget that's currently sitting with Glasgow City Council or with the health service or some other budget that is itself vitally important. So I've got to be honest about that. There's a lot we can do, and we're open that. I think some of the suggestions here about thinking differently about it, these are all really helpful suggestions, but I can't stand here and say, don't worry about this because the Scottish Government can take it all away. We can. And for me that underlines the nonsense situation of having decisions taken over there and the impact having to be dealt with over here. If you had the situation where we were taking decisions, I'm not saying we'd always get them right, I'm not saying everything in the gap would be rosy, but we would have an alignment between the various things we're responsible for that we don't have just now. And instead of having to spend however much that list I gave you a minute ago added up to, we could actually maybe spend that on helping people directly with some of the challenges they're facing rather than just having to deal with the impact of decisions we don't like. So we will continue to be open-minded to any suggestion about how we can help and do things differently.
Nicola, thanks so much, and a lot of your time, really appreciate it. Very crisp answers. Thanks for some very, very good questions and very